Free Worlds League, Huntington, South Hemisphere, March 18th, 3067. Evening. Memories are such a funny thing. Cicero could remember every square centimeter of the bunkhouse in which he spent his childhood, the color of the paint on the walls, the smell of organic decay, and even the sounds of the birds that would penetrate the occasional broken pane of glass. The voices of his cohort were as distinct as if they were laughing and joking just moments ago. He could remember all those things from decades ago, but Cicero couldn't remember how he had crawled out of the ruined remains of his BattleMech. Sitting on armor plate, still warm from the battle, it was obvious at a glance that the Marian refit enforcer would never walk again. The exterior of the mech looked more pitted and scarred than not, and every penetrating tear and hole from autocannon fire felt like a personal wound to the now dispossessed Mechwarrior. Cicero could not recall how long it had been since the last moment when his opponent cut him down. In the heat of battle, seconds drag into hours, but in the aftermath, when the chemicals that flood a warrior's brain in moments of life and death are spent, time exacts its cost. Everything has a price, and the bill is ultimately due. Around the ruined mech were the fallen, both comrades and foes tangled in motionless combat. The red of the Marians was mixed with the Free Worlds League purple. In any other circumstance, the colors would work together. Now, in the eerie silence of a battle long over, it was a noble shroud of pointlessness. Cicero's head hurt, but everything hurt. He reached into his breast pocket to pull out the flask he kept to keep the ghosts at bay, but when he lifted it to his lips, there was no sensation of alcoholic liquid on his tongue. Blinking hard, he looked down and saw there was no flask in his hand. He had no hand or the arm it was attached to either. Everything past his right collarbone was missing. Sighing with a ragged breath, Cicero coughed and tasted iron. With some effort, he was able to pull the flask with his left arm and brought it to his parched lips. It offered minor relief, but after a few pulls, the flask was now empty. He looked down at it and appreciated the tarnished silver before setting it down on the armored plate next to him. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled and the silence was broken by the droplets of rain hitting metal around the battlefield. Cicero sighed again, still trying to piece together his thoughts and memories into something that would make sense. He could remember the dropship landing and disembarking with his troops, but when he tried to focus on what happened next, his head hurt and things fragmented. Fearful cries on the comlink, explosions all around them, and the brutally loud sound of metal smashing up against metal bullied each other to dominate Cicero's thoughts. Giving up for now, he looked at the droplets of dirty rain that were falling all around him. Instead of cleaning the dirt and soot from the armor, it seemed to only smear it with the smoky pollution the droplets had collected in the air. A flash of intense light blinded Cicero and forced him to raise his remaining arm to shield his face. The unmistakable sound of BattleMech's steps closed on his position. He was in no condition to fight or try to hide. The time for that was long over. It would have been beneath a centurion to do anyway. The BattleMech's footsteps shook the ground, but eventually they stopped and the searchlight cut out. Temporarily blinded, Cicero just sat there and stared down at his mech. The rain started to fall harder now, creating a steady drumbeat of compounded failure on his mech's armor. Even when the bootsteps approached and stopped just a few yards away, Cicero didn't look up. The voice of an older woman, artificially aged by something, trauma or inhaling too much smoke over many years, asked, "Didn't quite work out the way you expected." Cicero closed his eyes and took in another breath as deep as he could manage with the throbbing pain in his side. After a second breath, he responded, "No, I suppose not." Able to see enough now, Cicero looked at her boots. They were black leather and looked like an army issue. Her legs were bare and showed telltale signs of scarring from a fire at some point in the distant past. It was obvious from the shorts and coolant vest that she was a Mechwarrior who had just arrived and so rudely blinded him with the searchlight. Stopping at her face, Cicero took in her weathered features and wondered if he looked as tired as she did. At least she had both arms. "Can I ask how you did it?" Cicero said as he looked back down at the BattleMech. The woman chuckled and responded, "It was just a matter of time. Human beings are creatures of habit, and you Marian folk doubly so. We knew that you'd follow a pattern. Once established, it wasn't too difficult to sort out where you pirates would hit next." The word pirates burned in Cicero's brain, and it made him grind his molars together, at least one of which felt like it had been knocked loose. After a few moments, he grumbled, "Not pirates, empire builders." The female Mechwarrior furrowed her brow and responded quickly, "It's a sorry lot of pirates that have to delude themselves into thinking they're the noble good guys." This time Cicero was quick to reply when he said, "The concept of good guy is so foreign to the inner sphere states that it borders on lunacy to invoke the term." The woman shifted in her stance a bit, then asked, "What's your name?" "I'm Centurion Cicero Timms, and this was my legio," Cicero replied. The woman took in the info and digested it for a moment before saying, "I'm Captain Sharon Belay, and you're going to need to come answer some questions. Once we get you checked out by a medic, of course." "Well, Sharon," Cicero interrupted himself with a ragged cough before continuing, "I'll be fine. I imagine I'll pass out soon, and then I can join my legionnaires." "I don't think so," Sharon said, crossing her arms over her coolant vest. Cicero laughed, then coughed again, tasting more iron on his tongue. He looked up at her with crimson on his lips when he said, "I don't think it's a matter of opinion." The two stood there in the rain for almost 30 seconds before either of them spoke. Headlights from an approaching off-road medic vehicle could be seen bouncing in the distance. Cicero looked up at them, and then over at Charon's Marauder painted in purples and blues. The sight unlocked a memory from the battle, where the mech had clipped his enforcer's legs out from under it. He chuckled, coughed, and said, "That looks familiar." "Yeah, I imagine it would," Charon said before continuing. "I didn't think you survived the fall, but you showed up on our drone IR." "I don't suppose you could ship my legionnaires home to their families?" Cicero asked as he felt his eyelids getting increasingly heavy. "I could lie and say yes, but I think you know I won't," Charon replied. Cicero could feel the ache in his side growing to a painful throb. Still, he struggled to keep from passing out, fighting for some inexplicable reason to hang on a little longer. "You could have been part of a grand empire instead of part of a dying one," he croaked out. Charon pondered a response for a few moments before saying, "I want to live in a universe where there are no empires." Cicero countered, "There'll always be empires. Mankind is destined to oppress itself into oblivion." "Not today," Charon said as she looked back down toward the approaching vehicle. Cicero nodded and laid back on the armored chest of the enforcer. Through the cloudy skies and billowing smoke, he could see the occasional patch of stars. Charon said something, but by that point he didn't much care for the banter. His mind filled with thoughts of home and glory once held. He closed his eyes one final time, took in a deep breath, and was gone. Charon stood there for a few minutes, not saying a thing before the medic's vehicle rolled to a stop at the base of the mech's wreckage. She hand-waved it as the medics piled out of it, and they hesitated for a bit before getting back in. The rain had stopped by this point, leaving everything covered in gritty soot, including the Mechwarriors on that ruined enforcer, in the middle of what used to be an agricultural lowland, but was now a temporary killing field. Taking a few steps forward, Charon kneeled down next to the body of the fallen Marian pirate. She didn't feel respect, or even empathy for the dead Mechwarrior. She felt nothing at all, and quite frankly, that concerned her. After these many months of plotting and planning to ensnare the Marian Legio, this opportunity felt too perfect. If it had been a trap within a trap, she wouldn't have been surprised. Instead, she was disappointed to see the company of red battlemechs collapse under the combined LRM fire of her forces. Most fell without firing a useful shot in return. The enforcer held out the longest, and the gold accenting on it suggested it was their officer. Several well-placed PPC shots cut through the legs of the medium mech and left it stumbling and collapsing into the muck and mire. An overzealous lancemate riddled the mech with autocannon fire before Charon could call for a ceasefire. She suspected that's what nearly bisected the Marian Mechwarrior lying in front of her. Taking a long look at the fallen man, Charon tapped the comlink on her collar, and her second responded quickly. "What's up, Captain?" "Battlefield is secure. You're agreeing to police up the bodies and take salvage," she said, pausing for a moment before adding, Keep the Marians on ice and we'll send a message out for their retrieval. If they want their people back, they can send a ship. Unarmed. Turning back towards Cicero, Charon knelt down and picked up the silver flask. Gliding her fingertips over the ancient battle scene carved into the metal, she wondered if the Marian propaganda fed to their own people created genuine feelings of loyalty and destiny, or if it was no better than any other state messaging. At least the silver looked to be high quality. Charon stuffed the flask into the back pocket of her shorts and began to trudge down off the Enforcer and toward her battle mech. Not today, Charon said again, this time to herself. I hope you enjoyed this little piece of BattleTech fiction. It's important to me that we keep producing some fiction for the channel from time to time. If you enjoyed it, positive comments are always great for the old brain chemicals. Liking and subscribing to the channel helps it grow and guarantees more BattleTech content in the future. Until we meet again, take care and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.